Today really needs no introduction. Earle Bowden is a member of this club. Some of our best presentations come from our members. He's a native of the pine woods of Northwest Florida. He has been in the journalism field forever. As a sports reporter, as a writer, author, and as an educator. Earle has been very much ingrained in the development of Northwest Florida, and in particular this community. He's been a great friend, and I consider him to be a great mentor in the field of historic preservation and all that goes into preserving and interpreting history for the Panhandle. Please welcome our friend Earle Bowden.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Ain't nobody that good, but you finally convinced me. I thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I often wonder why a club like this would invite an editor to speak. There is that real world perception that we are severe critics, that we expose the dark side, a messenger worthy of extinction. And you know, a newspaper editor is someone who is always there when the politician needs someone to kick around. But we really have purpose. A surgeon and an engineer and a newspaper editor will argue about the creation. Which of their professions was really the oldest? The surgeon says, it says right there in the book of Genesis, that a rib was taken from Adam to create Eve. And that has to be a surgical accomplishment. Wait a minute, said the engineer. It says in Genesis that even before Adam and Eve, that order was brought out of chaos. And that has to be an engineering feat. Yes, said the editor, but where do you think the chaos came from? In the beginning was the Word. And speaking of that, as I prepared this talk last night, I went to bed, I had a dream, kind of a nightmare really. It flooded my night with all kinds of things. I woke to a thunderclap, and I saw burning newsprint aggravating my nostrils. In the night, lightning zigzagged the news, the final edition of the news. It was burning up all the Blackberries and iPads and smartphone screens that are surgically attached to the human anatomy, and seared away the four corners of internet monitors worldwide. I heard laughter from the all-knowing, all-seeing Google, that instant library and of the world's wisdom in our texting and tweeting fingertips. I saw the onrushing, nameless bloggers grinning with outrageousness in the vast computer screens of digital eternity. Across the world, lawns thirsted for this great spring rain that brings the flowers. But no, it shed these large font-sized tears for that early morning plop of the newspaper, the double bag news. Newsprint hot with the freshness awakened American homes for generations. The bite of brewed coffee, it will never be the same. Yet the news delivery man, who dutifully greets the dawn in his appointed rounds, shifts into high gear and waves in an affectionate farewell. Suddenly I see a tradition of free expression that is old as colonial America vanish before my eyes, and I darken the computer screen in the middle of a fascinating blog about a Hollywood scandal that no one really cares about in the next 15 minutes. Where are the watchdogs of freedom, of democracy? Who will cover the community? And does anyone really care anymore? As if attached to the human anatomy, we hold in our hands the Google world. But can newspapers, under the threat, can they turn from being perceived as woefully uncool anymore to super cool and harness today's cyberspace world, taking us into the immediacy of all eternity? Yes, newspapers can and they will. Like the News Journal, with its 125th birthday, which comes next week, March the 5th, the founding of the Daily News in 1889. The first successful daily born on Palafox and Indonesia streets. Indeed, a Pensacola legacy dating from the Floridian in Andrew Jackson's Spanish military outpost that was turned into American Pensacola in 1821. A legacy of 23 weekly newspapers, rising and failing in the years leading to the success of Frank L. Mays' Pensacola Journal, a weekly that started on Government Street and in 1898 turned into a daily and became the premier periodical of the early 20th century. A legacy that includes lawyer, Florida legislator, and publisher John P. Stokes, who used the Daily News to advance his political agenda. And failing, he sold the paper to John Holliday Perry in 1922 and departed for a new life in Miami. But before he left, he angrily wrote that he hoped to see the day when grass would be growing in the middle of Palafox Street. A legacy that brought John Holliday Perry to join two struggling daily newspapers in 1922 and 24 into the Pensacola News Journal Company and moved into the three-story building on Romana Street, the newspaper that would campaign for the extension of Jefferson Street and build a $250,000 plant at the new corner of Jefferson and Romana Street in 1949. That the Gannett Company would purchase from John Holliday Perry Jr. in 1969 for $15.5 million and spend nearly $8 million spreading those publishing operations across the entire block that I named One News Journal Plaza. It is the legacy of the afternoon Pensacola News and the morning Pensacola Journal, joined together as the News Journal in 1985, and my place for more than 60 years, including 44 years and 3 months. 31 of those years I served as editor-in-chief of the paper. I'm thankful for the opportunity to have the paper champion such public enterprise as Gulf Islands National Seashore, University of West Florida, historical preservation in the reclamation of 4 downtown heritage districts, leadership Pensacola, renovation of the Sanger Theater, downtown and Bayfront renaissance, scenic highway preservation, and editorial campaigns for consolidated government, charter government, and the appointed school superintendent. Yes, Pensacola pioneered newspaper in colonial West Florida. It was already an established American tradition when Gary Nichols and George Turnbull followed Jackson to Pensacola for the first edition of the Floridian on August 18, 1821. He published it in English and Spanish. Along with the American settlers, the population was more than 4,000, and along came the first printing press, a hand-cranked flatbed press shipped by sea from Philadelphia with cases of hand-set type. Yes, newspapers will survive because they are part of the local web, they are part of the tradition, and they should remain an influential voice, stitching the community together. Journalism in its original form has broadened into the English broadband, as we all know, a source that will say what's going on and what's happening in the town, a venue for local advertisers to find buyers. Newspapers naturally will shrink more, as they already have, They will no longer need the physical space that they have, but they will offer more and more cyberspace platforms, as everybody's calling them. The community relies heavily on the real journalism that newspapers provide. Astute management of newspapers offers the instant world in a format of your choosing today, a vital, easy-to-find stream of information. Especially Gannett, one of the largest companies in the world, with its unique national newspaper, USA Today, and its digital internet programs that cover the world instantly. Next week, the News Journal will start celebrating its 125th anniversary, making us the oldest continuing business in Pensacola dating from the Daily News. The paper will relocate to another downtown site, not announced yet, but that place will be in the same neighborhood where the Daily News began, where the Journal came 10 years later on East Romana Street. The News Journal no longer needs an entire block of a downtown footprint and printing hardware. Like most newspapers across America, they are selling their properties. The contractual printing with the mobile register has proven beneficial. Market studies still show that longtime subscribers still want a traditional newspaper, even if many more are gravitating to those devices that allow them digital access to pnj.com. Reporters and photographers today do more. Photo galleries and video with every story. The digital age has given photographers an endless showcase on the website. News Journal photographers shot more than 2,500 pictures during Hurricane Ivan. No way that many pictures could appear in a newspaper. During the month of March, the News Journal staff tells me that they will now be offering 70 more pages of local news and information each week. That's 10 pages a day. And a larger collection of national and international news and sports provided by the international staff of USA Today. More business news, more community news, more information about charities and nonprofits. The internet has diminished the newspaper's old business model, but the digital age has transformed journalism into a new multimedia information system, and can be even more vibrant marketplace for ideas and commerce. Now, critics do call newspapers dinosaurs. Very fashionable to do that now. They're too ponderous. They're not quick enough. Still, in reality, quality newspapers allow people to make critical conditions relating to their communities. A strong local community newspaper the size of the News Journal can be an asset to building the future, and certainly for expanding and strengthening democracy. Now, the newspaper survived only on one thing: its strong visual writing, its concern and respect for tried and proven values and civil discourse, alert to adversity and diversity that is altering society in these times, adhering to a strong code of ethics that remains the lifeline to our own credibility. More, we have to continue to cultivate the newspaper reading habit, too much diminished by the bothersome blurring of the lines between journalism and entertainment, and the blurring of lines between news and opinion, diminishing our hope for remaining an authoritative medium. Tomorrow's newspaper may be different, but it has to do what it's done all along to protect its franchise, reflect the heart and the spirit of the city and region. Serve and engage readers in a partnership of trust, and be a watchdog over public power and the misuse of governmental power. Even the internet, global, instant, billions of words and graphic images available by keystroke, cannot put the reader back home in the middle of the city council or county commission meeting, or on playgrounds and in the sporting arena. I try not to be nostalgic or sentimental or folkloric about newspaper legends. I try not to let that cloud my vision. Newspapers are more professional, better written, better packaged, and brighter and flashier than when I began here as a humble little sports writer in 1953. Nor can they forget the basic fairness and completeness and compelling news and editorial leadership. Newspapers will survive because readers want to sit back comfortably, not all tensed up at a keyboard. They provide readers with identity, and it's not easy to establish your persona through an electronics data system. Printed newspapers let the eye scan and process large quantities of information at a glance. Newspapers are tangible and therefore authoritative. Since the 19th century, newspapers have been identified as the true mass medium, the extraordinary, unifying, and cohesive force that gives everyone access to the same pool of vicarious experience. Newspapers very well may be the best way to spread democracy if we carry our editorial positions carefully. Rudiments should not change, and that is tolerance and balance and concern for the community, respect for the individual, and sense of place and an obligation of fair play. Our only artillery is argument and persuasion, for it is the people who must act and must do, and must cause action and change. Our only underpinning is our credibility. We hope we help them and inform them and make them think before they act. I consider myself fortunate to have started when I did. I heard a lot of voices in that searching youth years. At 17, I was editor of the Alpha Times in a town with less than 500 people. I worked for an old-time printer with a thirst for John Barleycorn, who came to town with a flatbed press and a shirt tail of type. He didn't even have a linotype. I sold grocery advertisements. Thursday afternoon, I carried the papers to the post office, and I drove the publisher's 1940 station wagon through the back countryside, selling subscriptions for $1 a year, $1.50 a year for a weekly paper. I was offered collard greens, chickens, eggs, instead of money because there wasn't that much. And then there were those pleasant nights as an FSU student when we banged on those old Underwood typewriters and quarreled with the sweating printers of the Tallahassee Democrat while putting together the Florida Flambeau, as if our mission was competing with the New York Times. As an editor, I've often thought that we should embrace the renaissance of our time without crushing it, enrich life and land and country and nation and nature without polluting them, and deepen our love for human rights and the political freedom without mutilating them. I found those challenges in journalism. Understand the power of language, understand history as a river of continuity. Journalists should know and study American history. They must understand economics to cherish the written word as a visual communication. Understand and respect and appreciate the American concept of liberty and the democratic institutions that protect our freedom and give us the opportunity to excel in the calling of our choosing. and uphold that free voice concept that remains the linchpin of the Bill of Rights. And finally, as a citizen who believes that community involvement and participation is a responsibility equal with the editorial mandate to write about and support good government and good citizenship. So radical or reactionary, Republican, Democrat, liberal, or conservative, mattered on matters great and small, the American newspaper has the responsibility in the endless, honest crusade for human dignity. I believe in recognizing the good works of citizenship. I believe in saluting the town's heroes, and equally important in turning the newspaper's investigative arsenal on wrongdoers in all aspects of human endeavor, from crime in the streets to the more subtle abuses of public power. It is not affection that we seek, but respect. Believability is all we have, and the decision to publish or not publish hinges on truth and intellectual honesty and public interest. Again, I use the word fairness. The editorialist has many lofty objectives: fights battles, defends liberties, protection from governmental excesses, and as Mr. Dooley said, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. A moment to smell the roses, another to swing the broadaxe. The free press is synonymous with a free society. One is not possible without the other. When one dies, the other dies. Freedom of speech and free press are synonymous. For a free press is simply an extension of the individual freedom of expression. I conclude with thoughts from a recent column I wrote about the newspaper leaving 101 East Romana Street. I wrote, yes, the newspaper still scoots across the front lawn. I unroll the fresh morning, smelling freshly brewed coffee. I grab the world with grand anticipation. Yes, I think of growing up and growing older at 101 East Romana Street, awaiting a new venue and greener pastures. And tomorrow will bring another day as God intended, when German Johannes Gutenberg in 1439 gave us the printing press and movable type. Keep the faith. Thank you very kindly.